Welcome to this episode of CxO Disruptors, where our mission is to inspire innovation. I'm your host, Sandeep Sajani. We're taking on a very important topic today, so do stay with us. Diversity, equity and inclusion has finally become a business imperative across the world for many organisations. Transformative action, though, is needed right now. We want to hire more diverse workforces, provide equal equity across race, gender, sexual orientation and disability, and enable a workplace where everyone feels acknowledged and accepted for who they are. Many studies now have shown that diversity improves business outcomes and engages your teams much more. Yet prejudice and fear remain obstacles to moving this forward. I'm thrilled today to be joined by two thought leaders in this space. I'd like to give a very warm welcome to DK Bartley of Moodys, where he's the Chief Diversity Officer, and Julia Tierney, who is the CEO at Hive Learning. A very warm welcome to both of you. The George Floyd movement. Why was this event so powerful from your perspective?
Wow. It was powerful for a variety of reasons. But the number one reason why it was so powerful was because the world was home in their living rooms watching television, okay? The pandemic, it's one of the, as bad as the incident was, it's one of the aha moments of the pandemic. And it's what I like to call the turning point when you talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? Particularly in America, where for years, people have, wondered, is there systematic racism? Is there really a difference? Are there difference in opportunities for blacks and whites and women and men, et cetera? And you saw a man basically killed, murdered, on television, through your own eyes. So for most people, it was a conversation not only about race and diversity and equity and inclusion, but it was a conversation about humanity, right? And as a human being, you got to feel something. Something in your bones said this was wrong, and we've got to do better as people, right? Regardless of your color, regardless of your gender. So I do believe that that was an awakening. It was a turning point where people were able to see that there is something very wrong with this, where someone can die in police custody based on, a perception of what someone thinks that they're doing.
Do you think that the business world has reacted as ferociously as it should do to an event like this?
Yes. And that to me is one of the exponential benefits, you may say, of being able to experience something. It's like we all experience what happened to George Floyd by seeing that. When I say experience it, not going through it, but had a moment where we learned something. I think in the business world, right, there was a conversation at that time around purpose. If you're a millennial, if you're a Gen Xer, you're a Gen Yer, most of these people, the younger generation, they're looking for jobs where these companies represents their thoughts, their ideas. They don't just want to work at a company to get a pension anymore, right? That's the baby boomers. So because that conversation was going on, if you're a corporately, socially responsible organization, you could not turn a blind eye to that, right? And it kind of became a competition of how much more can I do as a company? And you've got to give credit to organizations, both large and small, who are putting in policies to promote equity and equality, who are looking at the way they hire, the way they promote, how things are distributed within an organization, what opportunities exist, and most importantly, how they develop, right? Since George Floyd, we have been having what we call courageous conversations, right? And courageous conversations are about, getting comfortable, being uncomfortable, and asking those questions that may be taboo or you may make you feel a little bit out of place, but the idea that it's coming from a good place and you want to understand how to work more collaboratively together, right? And it's not just about race, it's about all things that are different.
How have you gone about setting your goals for DE&I for the business?
From the top on down, everyone speaks about DE&I. They don't just speak about it once in a while, they don't just speak about it when it's a month, whether it's, Diwali or Black History Month or Women's History Month. It's authentically a part of our DNA, right? So you'll hear it very often that people say that, that DE&I is a part of our DNA. And we really, really mean it when we look at our policies and procedures. Is it as inclusive as possible, right? What do we need to change to be more inclusive? Our training. A lot of companies, you get that DE&I training and it's like, sexual harassment training. You get it in, you get it done, and you move on. That's not the way it is at Moody's. At Moody's, it's an ongoing process. It's a commitment. So you start with, module 1, module 2, and next year you'll go into a different type of training. And that allows us to have checks and balances to see how we're actually advancing the behaviors, and those behaviors are advancing the demographics, right? And then lastly, I think this is really, really important, is the level of disclosure and transparency. Bringing it back to the George Floyd thing. Most companies before George Floyd weren't talking about their numbers and what they look like, et cetera. And with us, we've actually disclosed our numbers. So if you go onto the Moody's website, you will see our diversity annual report. And it's a great conversation around, our accomplishments and where we can improve things, but also how we're doing it. You can clearly see all of our programs, et cetera. So when you look at it that way and you have the executive buy-in and then the employees see it working, right? It's a great conversation around continuity, collaboration, and I think creativity.
What have you learned in practical terms from the work you've done in helping senior leadership to really invest in DE&I?
I seem to see that it's not just the business case, but it seems to be the storytelling is one of consistently what I hear is one of the biggest ways, sort of the reverse mentoring, how you get someone to really understand and see and feel it. I've actually worked with female CEOs that don't think there's any problem in their organisation around women, and then you get them into these brilliant DEI leads or CDOs who take them on this kind of, you hear these stories about the posters on the wall of the stories that the women who work in the organisation, the microaggressions they've seen. And that's the moment when they go, really? In this company? No. We also, and I think so that visibility, the storytelling, as well as the data and spotting those people and helping them through that seems to be kind of the key tools.
For us, there is this really authentic commitment to understand it is a business imperative, and that if we're not doing it, to the highest level, our customers are going to miss out on something, and our employees are not going to be equally represented.
Drilling into the data, one of the biggest blockers we see across kind of those leadership teams and C-suite actually isn't the problem of I don't believe it's a great thing to do. One of the biggest blockers is actually, particularly with certain types of diversity, the acronyms and the right things to say. People lean out of the conversation because they're worried about saying the wrong thing. And obviously a lot of these terms are evolving as we go, and and a lot of people kind of came from a childhood where different words were okay to describe different things that aren't now. And I think we see over and over again people just lean out of that conversation because they feel just scared that they're going to say the wrong thing and get into trouble. And so I think one of the big ways for people, actually really big unblocker really early, is to give them those glossary of terms, help people feel comfortable that as long as you're well-intentioned, it's okay if you say the wrong thing, ask people first, you don't have to always know the right words. I think getting comfortable with that is a really big unblocker for kind of SLTs and sort of traditional, perhaps sort of older generations that came from a different place when it came to a lot of these terms.
It's a great point, and especially because it's so emotional, isn't it? It's a topic that's so emotional, and I'm going to put my foot in it if I try and say or try and understand something better.
Well, I think I have the ultimate example that she doesn't know, but she's going to love this. Well, hopefully she will. But that's part of the reason why we've incorporated innovation, and Hive Learning, our inclusion app, is literally what she's just described. Is we house all of that in the app, right? So we have a whole glossary around diverse terminology, right? We have a whole toolkit around how do you have these courageous conversations, not just the ones that are formal, but the ones that are informal, right? We have a whole conversation around step by step, what to say, what not to say. Because to Julia's point, the idea is that it's not going to be comfortable, and you actually may make a mistake, but guess what? It's okay, right? At Moody's, no one there is, as far as I know, is ill-intentioned, right? We all want to do the right thing. We all want to make sure that the company advances as much as possible. And we provide that framework so that, for the most part, you won't make a mistake, right? If you do the work that you need to do in doing the research and think about what you're going to say and how you're going to say it. And that really helps because within that inclusion app, now think about it, we're a company that has an app for that, right? So if you're looking for what to do with diversity, how to do it, even how to measure success, as a manager, you can go into the app and have some guidelines around it without having to call me or someone on my team.
And ask questions to the community, and there's a lot of discussion around what is and isn't okay, and for every organisation it's different. And so having the means to have that ongoing dialogue around it where everybody can see, everybody's got visibility of the people at the top and the people at the bottom in the same situations, trying to ask questions, learning as they go, and making it like a learning culture around that, I think is a real...
Yeah. And why that's important is, as I said, we started this conversation around data. And data is exactly that. It doesn't lie. It gives you information. So we get trends and themes around what people are talking about, right? So what are they concerned about? Like, I'll give you one quick example. During COVID, mental health was a huge issue. Now think about that. Whether you are a woman, whether you're Black, whether you're Asian, whatever you may be, your mental health, the way you view things and your sustainability and your family, whether you're alone, you're going to view that a little bit differently, right? So within our app, we saw lots of conversations around well-being, right? And because that's a big part of mental health and people that were isolated, et cetera. And we had ways to talk about it. And for our managers, really arming them with ways to identify areas that they could either add value or minimally just have a conversation around supporting an employee. That little nugget of how to talk about, well-being is huge, as opposed to the way it would be if you didn't have that app where you're like, I'm not sure, I don't know, I have no guidance, right? If you need to bring in HR, if you need to bring in, an outside center, whatever it may be, you're able to at least go and find those resources. And minimally, information, knowledge is power.
How are you thinking about deciding which part of DE&I do you tackle first? Do you tackle gender? Do you tackle racial difference? Do you tackle socioeconomic difference? Do you tackle disability? How do you think about that for a large organization?
I think it depends on your company. DE&I is not a one-size-fits-all. What's working for Moody's may not work for another company. What works for another company may not work for us. So that's why you have to have a strategy, right? You have to figure out, okay, this is what's most burning at this organization, right? It's like a fire, right? And you got to put it out. You're not going to be able to put the whole fire out immediately, right? You're not just going to drop a bomb on it. You want to do it in a way that makes sense.